Full disclosure, I started to write this video intending to do the usual play-by-play of every little nugget of sheer lunacy that's in this episode, and I found I just could not do it. Making videos should be fun and creative, but there is just so much garbage to go through here. It became a soul-draining slog. But in trying to digest this massive chum bucket of doom, there was an aspect of it that nagged and bothered me to the very core, and eventually I had a sudden realization as to what it was. Lucasfilm has entered a new phase.
Power of Daddy.
I'm not going to cover all the stupid little shit about how Plagueis wasn't even born yet, or a teenager at most, or how Richard Gere's gerbil turned traitor for no reason, or how the Sith have a rule of 2 but now there are 3 because reasons.
Or how lightsabers are mood rings now.
LA girls love their crystals. Anyway, an important component of a true girl boss story must include a teardown of a male role model. The more heroic, the better. They did it to Han Solo, Indiana Jones, Luke Skywalker, even Willow.
Rumor has it there were some cubicles at Lucasfilm that had pictures of Luke crossed out or used as a dartboard.
Right, you are, Doge. These are not the kind of people you want being the caretakers of a multi-billion-dollar property. But what happens when you run out of heroes to tear down?
You have to make new ones.
Exactly. So what you do is you deliberately cast a star from another really popular TV series where he was viewed as the hero, someone you know who can really act and really sell it, and make him the heart of your show. We know Leslie and the others already think like this because they wanted Matrix-style fights, and they brought in Carrie-Anne Moss to kind of reinforce that image.
As Spock said, that indicates two-dimensional thinking.
Yeah, this series is a little reminiscent of a child cutting up pictures from magazines and creating a whole brand new picture and calling it their own. So all through this series, Master Soul is built up, misguided perhaps, more emotional than any Jedi Master would be, sure, but he's generally presented as the moral center of this show. It starts at the beginning of the episode on Master Soul's ship, where he's been filling in Rick James on the entire backstory from 16 years ago.
Something she witnessed with her own eyes, by the way.
A disturbing pattern develops here and persists throughout the rest of the episode. Master Soul, in explaining his actions that night, never describes that fateful moment where Head Witch turned into a smoke demon monster thing and started to turn May into smoke, and how he reflexively took decisive action to do what he thought was right to protect the child.
Like we said last week, the mother had multiple opportunities to defuse the situation, but instead she escalated.
It was the equivalent of Head Witch suddenly pulling out something that had looked like a weapon. So this scenario plays out repeatedly over the course of this episode. Every time Soul has a chance to explain what really happened in that critical moment, something we all saw with our own eyes, mind you, he never does. Even at the end, when Osha overhears his confession, he has another opportunity to tell her what happened, to what led him to making that decision. But all he is allowed to say is just the things that validate and fuel her hatred.
They cannot have Master Soul fully explain himself because his being justified in his actions would unravel their agenda-driven narrative.
Right you are, Doge. There are times in the creative process where a whole story can spring up just from a single image in somebody's mind. For George, it was 2 droids in a desert. Here, I think the idea for this entire series started with the image of Osha force choking an unarmed man on his knees and telling him to shut up until he died.
Stop talking.
They then would have worked backwards from there to build the story, and that's probably one of the reasons the narrative for the show is nonsensical and largely incoherent. They didn't care about any of that. All that mattered was the destination, this image, this moment. What do you do when you run out of heroes to denigrate? You make new ones that you can tear down. This is Lucasfilm's new phase. George's message for Star Wars was always that good triumphs over evil, the most basic of storytelling messages. So I ask, what the hell is this crap? What's the message here?
Ugh.
Based on the evidence of our own eyes, those of us watching this show, if there's one takeaway from this entire show, it's that Rick James was out for vengeance in this series, but everything that happened had been her fault. Instead of taking accountability for starting the fire that ultimately killed everyone in the temple, including her mother,
it was the patriarchy.
and she's not the only one. Leslie Headland's wife throws Master Soul under the bus to save her own ass, and even that move didn't make sense. The Senate was investigating the Jedi. If she had actually told the truth and said, hey, there are Sith out there, that would have justified the continued need for the Jedi without having to sully the name of the only person on the show who was morally good. These people end up acting as evil as they want and still feel like they're the victims, just like in real life. And in order to fulfill their victimhood narrative, the Jedi must be made into the bad guys, even going as far as to suggest that Leslie Headland's wife told Yoda what was going on, making him complicit in her evil. Previously, I'd said that Doctor Who and Star Wars were in a race to the bottom, but with this, Star Wars won by a mile.
12 parsecs, actually.
It is, objectively, one of the worst pieces of content I have ever had the misfortune of experiencing. And I realize that's not the first time I've said that this year, but this is the worst. I might even go as far as to classify it as misandrist. And as I said in my Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy video, I will not tolerate any hate on this channel. Master Soul's death scene made me regret covering this show at all. It was vile. This show went from comically inept to something seething with outright hatred. If Leslie Headland does know where the bodies are buried, as some are suggesting that's how she got this gig in the first place,
During a hiring freeze, no less.
and she's somehow able to leverage that power into forcing a second season, I will not cover it on this channel. Literally, any other piece of content out there is more deserving of coverage and attention.
How about gratuitous shots of my ass?
Done and done. Stay fresh, cheese bags.